I didn't need to convince her who I was, because real value doesn't come from explanation. It comes from consistency paired with boundaries. For a long time, I believed that if I just communicated better, explained my intentions more clearly, or justified my effort, it would be understood and appreciated. But what I learned is this: when someone truly values you, they don't need persuasion, they feel it. The moment I stopped justifying my effort, something important happened. My presence stopped being negotiable. I was no longer auditioning for a place in her life. I wasn't explaining why I deserved respect, time, or emotional safety. I simply showed up as myself and allowed the response to reveal the truth. Silence became my filter. When you constantly explain yourself, you unintentionally teach people that your value is up for debate, that it can be negotiated, delayed, or dismissed. But when you stop arguing for your worth, you create a moment of reckoning. Either the other person rises to meet you, or they quietly fall away, and that's not loss, that's clarity. Value doesn't demand attention. It doesn't chase recognition. It stands still and lets others decide whether they're capable of honoring it. The calm confidence of no longer needing validation changes the entire dynamic. You stop reacting, you stop overgiving, you stop proving, and in that stillness, people either recognize what they had, or they reveal that they never truly saw you at all. I taught her that access is earned, not automatic, not through words, but through absence. For a long time, my time and energy were freely available. I was consistent, responsive, emotionally present. I thought that showing up without hesitation was love. But consistency without boundaries doesn't teach appreciation. It teaches entitlement. When I pulled back my time and energy, my absence spoke louder than my consistency ever did. Suddenly, what was always there became noticeable only when it was gone. That's the paradox of access. People often don't value it while it's freely given, but they feel its weight the moment it's removed. I didn't withdraw to punish, I withdrew to protect. I realized that access to me, my attention, my support, my emotional labor, was not something anyone was entitled to simply because they were familiar. Access is a privilege maintained by mutual effort, respect, and intention. When I stopped being endlessly available, the dynamic shifted. Not because I changed who I was, but because I changed what I allowed. I no longer filled emotional gaps that weren't being reciprocated. I no longer compensated for someone else's inconsistency with my own overcommitment. Absence isn't manipulation when it's rooted in self-respect. It's a boundary, and boundaries clarify everything. They show who values connection and who only valued convenience. I no longer chased mixed signals or accepted half-effort. That decision alone changed everything. For too long, I met confusion with reassurance. When she was unsure, I became steady. When she hesitated, I leaned in harder. I thought love meant calming uncertainty, but what I was really doing was delaying truth. The moment I stopped meeting her confusion with reassurance, clarity became necessary. I didn't demand answers. I didn't issue ultimatums. I simply stopped filling in the blanks. And when you stop doing that, people are forced to confront their intentions or their lack of them. Mixed signals survive on your participation. They require you to interpret, excuse, and hope. When you step out of that role, the fog clears. Either someone shows up with direction, or they disappear into their indecision. I chose not to decode anymore. I chose not to translate inconsistency into potential. Half-effort stopped being something I negotiated with. It became something I declined. Clarity doesn't come from asking better questions. It comes from setting better standards. When reassurance ends, authenticity begins. People show you exactly where they stand when you stop cushioning their uncertainty with your emotional labor. And that truth, while sometimes uncomfortable, is always freeing. I chose self-respect over attachment, and that choice shifted everything. Attachment made me tolerate ambiguity. Self-respect made me allergic to it. I realized that wanting someone is never a reason to abandon yourself. When I stopped prioritizing the connection at the expense of my dignity, priorities shifted because people prioritize what they fear losing, not what they assume will stay. Familiarity breeds complacency when boundaries are absent, but self-respect reintroduces consequence. I didn't threaten to leave, I didn't demand importance. I simply stopped shrinking myself to maintain closeness. And that's when the dynamic recalibrated. Not everyone adjusted, but that too was information. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It quietly changes what you tolerate, what you accept, and what you walk away from without explanation. And that quiet shift is powerful. When you choose yourself, you stop begging to be chosen. You stop proving loyalty through self-betrayal. You become someone whose presence is felt because it is no longer guaranteed, and that's the moment priorities reveal themselves, clearly, honestly, and without words.